This is the RPM Podcast, starring Eric Brennan.
Give me all your balloons.
Sam Ballard Jr.
I'm not normally a praying man, but if you're up there, please save me, Superman.
Neil Rutt III.
We wish to welcome you so much, Finland.
Nick Rendo.
Typical of Italian cars. They wait until you really need them, and then they go wrong.
And Josh Matthews.
All BMWs are driven by people who are psychologically unfit to drive anything more powerful than an electric razor.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the RPM Podcast, the post-Daytona 500 edition of the RPM Podcast, and we have you covered with a full house. I'm Eric Brennan, joined today, of course, by Sam Ballard Jr. at the University of North Carolina in Charlotte. In the Edge of Divorce Motorsports Studios, we got Scott Riggleman back as well, as he was helping us out at the live show at River Rock. And in the Matthews Family Studios, we have, of course, producer Josh Matthews, but also joining us today, another member of the Riggleman family, and Tim Riggleman. Tim, how's it going, buddy?
Good. A little tired from speed weeks yet. Just been home 36 hours maybe. Besides that, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
He's being polite. He's tired. He's tired of waiting for Eric to show up and sign on.
It's not that bad, but we got a lot to talk about. And, Tim, I want to hear all about your Speed Week stories. We got to hear about Scott's venture last week in just a short bit. But first, we're going to put a bow on the Daytona 500, which Scott and Josh and I all had a chance to cover down at River Rock. Firstly, I want to thank all the people at River Rock Restaurant and Marina Bar for making it all possible, especially Jeff and Eric Lane. And we're happy to announce that we've already been tagged to serve there for the first Talladega race of the year. And we'll be back there on April 29th. For more information, visit therpmpodcast.com. That was amazing. I just can't thank all the people at River Rock enough because I had a great time. And Scott and I got to call the last few laps of the 500. Scott, I think you said it was the first time you ever got to do some play-by-play. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a little hard doing it from a TV screen. We were about 15 foot away from it, but we got to see pretty much of it, and it was fun calling the end of the race. And it was cool doing it with a live audience because they were really responding to what we were saying. It was a lot of fun.
If you want to check that out, you can check out the RPM Podcast YouTube channel, where we also have the whole 2-hour live show up there, including all of our interviews with Scott's wife, Nancy, the other half of Edge of Divorce Motorsports, young Ryan Coulthard, Chris Garbuck, and the list goes on. And you can check that out as well. Now, we led you into the 500 at River Rock, and then we all watched the Daytona 500. And I'll tell you, a lot of it may have been what we were all expecting. A lot of crashes, a lot of hard hits. A couple of drivers in the mix that you may not have expected, and it came out that it was Austin Dillon who ended up putting the 3-car back in victory lane, 20 years removed from when Dale Earnhardt Sr. was able to do such a thing in 1998. And, gentlemen, Austin Dillon's personality has caught a lot of people off guard. It's a little bit different, and somebody pointed out today on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, may have been Pete Pistone, in an ad that actually ran during the Daytona 500 coverage on Fox. Dillon was quoted as saying he likes wearing the black hat in the sport. He likes being the bad guy. And judging by the fan reaction from his win this past Sunday, that may, in fact, be what we're seeing. And for me, watching Dillon win that race, I thought it was cool. It was fitting. It was nice to see the 3-car back on top of Daytona on the Cup level. Is Austin Dillon the right winner in your mind from a publicity standpoint in the 500? How did that finish leave you guys feeling? And Sam, since you weren't with us at River Rock, I want to give you the first chance to strike at this. When that race ended and Dillon was in victory lane, how did you feel about the whole thing?
I mean, I thought it was cool. I mean, I think there was a fact out there that there's been 3 times on February 18th that Daytona 500 was, and all of Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s teams won. The 3, the 29 in 2007, and then the 3 last week. I mean, I thought it was cool. I mean, it was cool to see that. I kind of wanted to see Bubba win, but, you know, it is what it is. But, I mean, I thought it was cool. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was cool, too, the 3-car going back to victory lane. I was a little disappointed how it turned out. It definitely looked to me like he did turn Eric on the back straightaway and put him in the defense. So it was a little bit of a shame that he won it in those type of circumstances. But then again, I mean, he was pushing them, and that's what you do in this race. And sometimes it turns out good, and sometimes it turned out bad. And this time it turned out bad.
Now, Josh, you were watching the race with all of us at River Rock, and I think you were kind of watching me and Scott more than the TV at some point at the latter portion of those races.
I was trying to film it.
But The end of that race, Scott already mentioned the contact between Almirola and Dillon, which came with a half a lap to go. And it is a little bit suspect. And, that's something that we'll get into a little bit further here. Your thoughts overall with Dillon ending up winning that race?
I think it was going to happen to whoever was in that spot, to be completely honest. I'm not really an Austin Dillon fan. And you mentioned him liking to wearing the black hat when really you're wrong. He likes wearing that obnoxious, really stupid
cowboy
hat. But
while doing the dab thing, that's his thing too.
Again, yeah. I mean, well, that's where I guess you worry about demographics. I mean, how old is he? I mean, he's a young kid, really.
I believe he's somewhere between Sam and I. He's in his early 20s, mid 20s, so still relatively young.
Well, younger than me, and I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old or whatever, and I'm thinking these young punk kids or whatever, because, I mean, I don't like Chase Elliott.
27. He's Eric Biden's age.
There you go.
There you go.
But, I mean, I think, it feels good for a lot of people to see the three back in victory lane after, the 20 years, blah, blah, blah. I just think it's overhyped. They needed a feel-good storyline, and they got one, and they're going to play it out, and it's going to become incredibly annoying. It was like when the movie Titanic came out, and it's just all anybody freaking talked about, and it's just going to get played out, and I'm like, all right, great, cool, fun little storyline, but let's move on. Let's worry about Atlanta. We had our wreck fest already, so.
But you know what? Austin did run a really good race. I mean, he wasn't up front much, and really he didn't lead until the end of the race, and his car didn't have a scratch on it the whole race, so he made it through everything. I mean, what he did on the last lap, was it right or was it wrong? Who knows? But it was the last lap. It's not like he did it on lap 5 or lap 10 or lap 15. It was go time when it happened. What was his other choice? Let off a little bit and get past, or keep his foot in it? He kept his foot in it and won the race. So you got to give him a little credit there.
Like I said, I think it would have happened with whoever was in that position. And I don't think anybody would blame anybody for it. I mean, they're going to argue, and people aren't necessarily going to be happy about it. But you can't please everyone. And I mean, like Truex had a great run until he got caught up in a very late race incident. I mean, some guys got lucky, some didn't, and it's all about where you are on that last lap. And it was a late block kind of move. It was contact. He kept his foot in it. There were a lot of factors involved, and it's not entirely on Dillon what happened. But yeah, it would have been nice to see kind of like that Xfinity finish where it was a thousandth of a second, I believe it was, Eric.
Well, it actually went down to the 10,000th.
I'm sorry. Yes.
NASCAR. Yeah. Well, they usually don't go that far. They usually don't go 4 digits to the right of the decimal point. And they said it was 4,000ths of a second, 10,000ths of a second, I should say, that Tyler Reddick won over Elliott Sadler. So that's something we should be seeing more. Now, since we got Tim Riggleman with us, go ahead, Scott.
Another impressive thing, too, that a lot of people aren't talking about was this Richard Childress Racing in general. I mean, they had 3 cars in the top 10. I mean, I think Ryan Newman was 8th, and basically that Bubba's car, the Richard Petty car, is now an RCR car. They're based right at the RCR shops. For Richard Childress to have 3 cars in the top 10 at Daytona, I think that was great too. And you haven't really heard much about that. You just hear about Austin winning, but Richard Childress Racing had a great race.
Now, I heard something about RPM selling off a bunch of stuff or something about leverage. I don't know. Did you guys share that? There was some article that they have inventory that they're going to be selling.
Yeah, but that's the driving school stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that in an auction. They're selling off that was all Richard Petty driving experience stuff, not really the team.
Okay, is that to fund more of the Bubba?
That was all outdated garbage. They're just trying to get rid of it and buy some new inventory. That's all that was.
Outdated garbage. Okay.
I looked at the pictures. I always looked at the pictures. It's all outdated equipment. They're just selling it off.
Okay.
Now, being that we have Tim Riggleman with us today, and I want to tap into this resource while we have him. And Tim, I hope you come back many more times, despite how late I may have been tonight. For those of you who don't know, Tim is one of the most well-respected spotters in this section of the country, maybe in all of short track racing. Had a chance to work with John Blewett III throughout most of his racing career. Wall Stadium Championship driver Anthony Sesley tags Tim whenever he's free to spot for him when he comes back to running a full-size race car. And just fresh, as Tim mentioned, he was working with Eric Goodell down at New Smyrna Speedway. Tim, is there ever a point in your duties as a spotter, case in point, the final lap of the Daytona 500, where you kind of feel a little bit helpless. You can give your driver as much information as possible, but at the end of the day, he or she is going to do what she wants? Or is that more up to the trust level that you two have with one another? Because it seemed like that, I don't know if Almirola or Dylan were really paying attention to anything the spotters were saying. The result was going to be what it was, and that was pretty much it. Does your role ever change despite the circumstances in a race, is what I'm asking?
Well, first of all, it depends on the driver. And one thing I've learned spotting for 25 plus years, at the end of the day, it's always the spotter's fault, no matter what. The last lap at the Daytona 500, I really can't tell you. I've never experienced that. I have many friends that do that, and they claim that the drivers listen to them, and that's why they're with them. The last corner of the Daytona 500, it's anybody's race, and do they listen? No, I don't think so. On the last lap, they're just looking in their mirror and said, I can stick it in there,
I would agree with that 100%. And wasn't it Tony Stewart that made one of the dumbest blocking moves at the end of was it Daytona or Talladega? And then he pretty much ended up nearly upside down on top of half the field.
It was Talladega in 2012, I think it was.
Yeah, I thought it was the Pepsi 400 race or whatever it was too with Kyle Busch, wasn't it? That's when he bumped. Yeah, never mind.
But yeah,
Tim, with a track like Daytona, do you think they utilize two spotters on a track that big? Do you think they have a spotter on the front straightaway and the back straightaway?
When they had the backstretch grandstands, they definitely use two spotters. I don't know about it anymore because there's no place for them anywhere.
Because, that can come important too, because didn't Austin turn Eric on the back straightaway, and that's pretty far away from where the spotters are at. How accurate can they call the back straightaway from the front straightaway? I know they use binoculars and stuff, but by the time you look through the binoculars and call it on the radio, and the radio transmission gets to the driver, there's a delay there, you know what I'm saying? So who knows,
They definitely use two spotters at one time. If they do anymore, I don't know. I could find out very easily, but I don't know. I've been to Daytona with the girls on the front stretch, and I'd be sitting, I'm like, I could do this if I wanted to. You can definitely see from the front stretch. But, then again, having two spotters isn't a bad deal.
So now, Tim, now that we've had a couple days to kind of digest the final lap of the 500, I'm curious of what your thoughts are. Was that a dirty move on Austin's part, or that's just part of blocking for Almirola?
First of all, I was listening to it on the radio coming home from New Smyrna, and I was telling Josh before, it's just restrictor plate racing now, the kid lifted in front of him, and the kid in the 3-car said, yeah, I could take him out. They're not going to black flag me. There's no incentive to lift. He was either going to win or get passed. He's like, well, I'm going to win, And, it's just the way it is right now. That's the way I feel.
Now, see, Tim's kind of allowed me the opportunity here to segue into something which I read over the weekend. Jeff Gluck, who, of course, runs jeffgluck.com, former writer for USA Today, quoted Austin Dillon after the Xfinity race on Saturday when he got swept up in a crash, asking if he was okay. And Dillon said, quote, it's pretty hard to get hurt in one of these things nowadays. And Gluck said that's something that scares him. And it got me thinking about a topic of conversation which seems to come up rather often when we get to these plate races, and that is the element of danger in the sport of NASCAR's top 3 series. And I'm starting to think, after seeing a lot of the reaction from the 500, where many people are blaming stage racing, the aero package, the youth of the drivers, the reckless nature of the drivers, the pressures to win, the playoff system, and the list goes on, as being the reason for the multi-million-dollar crash fest we've been seeing in these plate races, when I think it kind of cycles back to the fact that the sport is so safe, when there is little consequences to making such rash and irrational decisions and moves that end in numerous cars getting torn up, I guess it's what you're going to have. When there is not as much risk as far as making a mistake anymore as there used to be. And you don't want to see anybody ever get hurt. Obviously, we've all had friends who were in precarious positions in race cars before, maybe not in the top 3 series, but some of us has lost really good friends in racing accidents. But I think, and Scott, I'm curious what you think about this. The fact that drivers may now be in that full false sense of security that racing is so safe on the top level, it kind of promotes recklessness. I'm curious if you agree with that.
I understand what you're saying. And when I saw that Daniel Suarez wreck, I looked at Nancy. I said, that guy's in trouble. That was a bad hit. He hit on a bad angle. He hit a ton. But he got out. He got out and walked away. So I was surprised. I understand what you're saying. It is safer. So now they think, if I wreck this guy, he ain't going to get hurt. But I'm telling you right now, if there's any drivers climbing in those cars that think they're 100% safe and can't get hurt, that's when they're going to get hurt. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't think like that. I mean, you're still doing 200 miles an hour in a car. You can still hit something that doesn't have a safer barrier, you know.
Kyle Busch at Daytona.
Kyle Busch. Yeah, I know that's a couple years ago now. I think that was 2015 when that happened.
And they thought they covered every spot that a car would hit, and he proved them wrong. And yeah,
I mean, just look at the ARCA race too, where that piece of roll bar tubing went through the guy's car. That could still happen today. You know, like you can still get hurt in a race car. I think by someone saying, "Hey, it's safe. I'm going to wreck this guy." As soon as they start thinking like that, someone's going to get hurt again. I don't think that's the right way to look at it.
Yeah, and honestly, you said it was Austin that said that.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at it, but I'm 90% sure that Jeff Gluck quoted Austin Dillon coming out of the Infield Care Center after being swept up in an accident in the Xfinity race on Saturday as saying it's really hard to get hurt in these things nowadays.
Now, I think Tony Stewart even yelled at a reporter for saying that the sport's too safe now and that the element of danger isn't there, and that's why people aren't watching. I think Tony Stewart's went nuts on the the girl that said that.
That was the chair comment.
What's that?
Right? That was the chair comment. Like, well, how do you like? Something was like, "Hey, Tony, how do you feel about these cars being safe?" And he was like, "Well, how do you feel if I saw off one of your legs of your chair? Would you sit on the chair? Would you feel safe?"
Right. Yeah. I mean, he went off on that girl. He's like, you know, every day I think about who asked me this most stupidest question from the press, and he's like, "You won that award today." He's like, "We're still doing 200." Yeah, he did. He went off on her. He's like, you know, it's still a dangerous sport. Don't think that it's not, you know, because it is.
I agree. And Scott, you and I run in what I would consider to be one of the safest divisions at Wall Stadium. Because one of the slower divisions, we have these big fenders with crumple zones, and compared to a smaller 4-cylinder or Legend car, and then the modifieds are going far faster than we are, and We've seen, people get injured even in our division. Not seriously, thankfully, but we've seen people, come out a bit sore and battered and bruised. I mean, the safety I think is good in our division, but it's never perfect.
No, it's all the racing, and the danger's there, and it will always be there. Has it gotten less of a dangerous situation? Yeah, but the danger's still there. These race car drivers think they can wreck and keep wrecking people. No one's going to get hurt. They're crazy.
I agree. Absolutely.
Scott,
now, as we start
to answer your question,
ahead,
I just texted Tony Hirschman, one spotter for the 500.
That's Matt Hirschman's dad, right, Eric?
that was one of those moments I thought would go away.
Anthony Hirschman, Matt Hirschman's dad. It's in fact his brother, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Winston.
All right. What
Thank you, guys.
I'm glad Scott remembered that from the live show. That was a good moment. So.
I was hoping he wouldn't.
Yeah, you're never safe, Eric. You're never safe.
So, Tim, what did Tony Hirschman say about the spotters at Daytona?
Just one. Just him.
Just one. Okay. Yeah. On the front straightaway, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So.
Now, this gives us an opportunity to dive
into hold on, Tim, can you ask Tony Hirschman who Danica Patrick's spotter was? That was something we could never figure out before either.
Yeah. That was Sam's job, and he dropped the ball because he was busy at some ridiculous baptism instead of at our live show. I mean, seriously, Sam, what kind of horrible human being has a baptism on the Daytona 500 day? Your sister's
don't act
in
like
trouble.
you guys don't need me. And who cares what Danica Patrick's spotter is? She didn't need one anyway.
Well, yeah, you're right. At first we did care because we were trying to figure out if she had a shot at winning this race, and we thought maybe she was teamed up with a good spotter. She had a better shot. She ended up wrecking, so who cares even now who the spotter was? They wrecked.
Right.
So
right. To be fair, I mean, there was nowhere for her to go. She did everything she could to avoid that wreck.
What people don't understand, she could have turned under him. But she was directly behind the car that wrecked. you don't know what kind of fluids she's sliding in. There could be water on the track, oil on the track, gear lube on the track. You just don't know, Yeah. I'm sure she was doing everything to turn that car down, and she was just sliding on. So everybody's like, well, the car behind her turned and went down under it. Well, he might not get on the same fluid she was on. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I remember, and this is my personal experience, and it's far, far from Daytona, but I was right behind Tiffany when her motor blew up, and I couldn't get, I mean, aside from, just trying to keep the car under control and the cars around me, I had nowhere to go. I couldn't get down if I wanted to. And then imagine doing it at Daytona at 200 miles an hour. Yeah, it was beyond her control at that point. It wouldn't have mattered who was in that spot. So, but that she ended her NASCAR career the way she lived it.
Well, Josh, you just bring up my next point. That race was essentially most likely the end of Danica Patrick's NASCAR career. And I'll tell you, the one thing that bothers me about the perspective that Danica seems to have on our sport, and I say our because we're all involved in it in some capacity, somebody quoted her during one of her press conferences saying that she's not going to spend much time at the racetrack, even when she's not driving. And even when she wasn't racing, she didn't pay much attention to it. And that bothered me because there's so many people, male or female, who eat, breathe, and sleep the sport of auto racing looking for a shot, which she has had numerous of. And she just doesn't seem to care enough. And there was a really long story that came out by ESPN.com's Bob Pockrass, and I want to invite you all to go check it out, talking about the inner workings of her deal with Stewart-Haas Racing, and one of which was a quote that Tony Stewart put in there, talking about a driver-crew chief combination, most notably between Danica Patrick and Tony Gibson, who was the Daytona 500 winning crew chief last year with Kurt Busch. And it was Danica who did not want to continue on with that relationship. And Stewart was adamant about saying he thought that was the best fit for Danica and the rest of her stock car career. And seeing her unwillingness to try to make those relationships work kind of defined her demise in a stock car. And those remarks coming out in what would be the weekend of her final Cup start and seeing it end the way it did, Josh, I agree with you, kind of fitting. That's all I can say about that one. I mean, yeah, she could have made the way for a lot of lady races.
Yeah,
but
she also lost that sponsor, Nature's Bakery, because she wasn't acting right with the company. The company wanted her to post, a certain amount of stuff about Nature's Bakery on her social media, and she wasn't doing it. So I think Tony Stewart had enough of her. Like you said, she didn't even want to pair with the crew chief Tony wanted her with, and then she loses a sponsor over not posting on social media. So I think that's part of the reason she was out at Stewart-Haas Racing.
Why would you want to work with somebody who's not all 100% what the brand they're for? I mean,
or for the team, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, you got to be all in. I mean, even me with my little team, if Nancy wasn't focused on it, I want her racing, but she's 100% in, so we let her race,
Or a host that doesn't share all the episodes. I mean, I don't understand why you want to work with someone like that.
Hold on.
But hey,
what the hell does that
side
mean?
note, Danica Patrick did a great podcast episode with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan does a great job with his podcast. It's 3 hours long or so, and you really get to know Danica Patrick. And I'll tell you what, I wish I saw this podcast 3 or 4 years ago. I'd actually be a Danica Patrick fan. I can't say anything bad about Danica Patrick. I mean, I think she's a great race car driver and a smart businesswoman. So good luck to her in her future.
I agree with Sam. I saw that Joe Rogan's probably next to Howard Stern, he's probably one of the best interviewers out there. That was a very good interview. I go back and watch it. Real quick on Danica, I live with 3 girls and my wife. And my little ones race at Wall Stadium. And Danica gave them huge confidence to do that. So there is another aspect of that with her. She's going to be missed by a lot of people.
I think another girl will come along and fill that role, though. I mean, we have a few in the market now.
She opened the door for that,
She was out of the females that have gone into NASCAR, or especially Cup Series alone. She was, by definition, the most successful. Maybe she wasn't great, but statistically, she was the most successful. And I think he's right because she was confident with her body, she was confident, with her personality. She had an attitude here and there. But I think overall she was a positive role model. And I think Natalie Decker is going to be good, too, as long as she doesn't get overwhelmed and swept up in it, because there's going to be a lot of pressure because, of being a female. Again, I don't think it should be that way. I think, it should be, another driver. That's how I want to look at it. But the media is going to have a fiasco with it. And I don't know. I wish her the best. Leilani Munter as well. I think it's going to get better and easier in the future, but it's just going to take a little time.
Now, the topic of women in motorsports is something that we've been talking about a lot. And Tim, because I have you here, I kind of want to pick your brain about this a little bit. There has been some criticism about Danica Patrick, and Josh mentioned Natalie Decker. She's been receiving similar criticism as well because of how they elect to market themselves. Now, you're the father of a couple of female racers. Do you want to live in a world where you're strictly based off of talent and not marketability? I mean, and your girls are pretty good at the Sunday Series racing they've been doing. So I'm just curious of your outlook on that as a whole, especially being the father of a couple of female racers.
Whatever pays the bills at the end of the day. If it's,
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
I admire the honesty.
Talent would be the way I would want them to go. We got a long way to go yet. They've just started. They're going to continue. They're going to continue this year. They're full forward. After that, I don't know. Like I said, if one of them's got to get in the bikini to get a $10 million contract, and that's better than I don't have $10 million.
I tell you what, I would get in the bikini for a $10 million contract. So why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
I get in a bikini for $10.
Now I know why Scott put Nancy in a car.
You get a bikini just for the fun of it. But anyway, I mean, it's not only girls that got to do crazy stuff for sponsorship. I mean, look how Michael Waltrip acted to get sponsorship.
Oh,
He's
God.
very much like a clown. You know what I'm saying? To get sponsorship, all these goofy commercials and stuff. Sometimes you just got to do what they want, to get the attention.
Or Blaney with the hair.
Yeah, Blaney with the hair and the retro stuff. I think if there was a few other drivers, if they would have done stuff like that, they'd still be in the sport,
Well, I think, you had, it's part of the personality thing, and because NASCAR, as Eric Graham would say, has kind of neutered the drivers' personalities a bit. You had Jimmy Johnson a few years ago promoting some movie, had like a big cotton candy colored Afro wig thing going on, trying to promote that. Just doing silly stuff to get noticed because you need that attention.
I mean, that's been going on in all sports forever. I mean, it goes back to the Chicago Bulls with Dennis Rodman. Look what he did to stand out. Yeah, he would he would dress up as a girl and get married. He was doing crazy stuff like that. But it worked for him. Sometimes it works for you. But then I don't really like the goofy stuff like that. But it works for some people.
Dropping waffles on cars.
There you go. Somebody doesn't seem to mind what he has to do as long as he drives the car. A driver who seems to wear the black hat rather well is that of Kyle Busch. And I'll tell you, I'm starting to see, especially after watching Austin Dillon win the 500, and a lot of people reminiscing on how long it took Dale Earnhardt to do such a thing, 20 years it was. I'm beginning to wonder if Kyle Busch is going to be the next driver that we look at to try to break that spell. For whatever reason, the 500 is a race that he just can't seem to get over. 2 flat tires, one of which resulting in major damage to the back end of his Toyota Camry. And it got me to thinking, who may the next driver be to kind of have to be forced to break that spell of not being able to win the 500? It's hard to believe Kyle's been racing at Daytona in the Daytona 500 since 2005. That's a long time. It's 2018 already. He's getting close to that 20 years, next 7 years or so. So I'm curious, who you guys think would be the next to maybe break out, or the driver who should win the 500 to just kind of pad their racing resume a little bit?
Hasn't Larson had terrible luck at Daytona? Like, wasn't his car ripped in half or whatever?
Does the engine land in the grandstand?
Yeah. So I would.
That was the Xfinity race in 2013.
So I would say probably him. I don't want to say choke Elliott, but he could be another one. That's the kind of luck that they're going to have, and I don't know, Sam.
As a breakout guy, I personally think that Michael McDowell is going to win the 500 one of these days. I mean, he's been up there all season in different cars, different teams. I mean, I think Michael McDowell's going to do that. I agree. I think Kyle Busch is going to, he might be a while. But you know what? Kyle Busch is like that, though. He's kind of like the old Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy would wouldn't be so good in the beginning of the season and kind of come on strong towards the summer months going towards the end of it. He just can't finish it at the end.
Stewart was known for that, too.
Right. He's like the Mr. October of NASCAR, I would say, Kyle Busch.
Another driver's name who come up in terms of Daytona 500 conversation, Brad Keselowski, probably one of the best plate racers in NASCAR right now, who is yet to win the 500 as well.
That's a shoo-in.
Going to have to wait at least another year to figure that one out. Finally, the youth of the sport was well served on Sunday. Ryan Blaney led over 100 laps in the 200-lap contest. Also, of course, Darrell Wallace Jr., or as they call him, Bubba Wallace, finishing second in the Petty 43. There was controversy in the offseason about how NASCAR was marketing only their young drivers and not some of the veterans that we've just been mentioning thus far. But my question to you guys, the biggest story about Darrell Wallace Jr., there's actually two. The altercation with Denny Hamlin following their crash in the race for second, and the post-race interview when his mother walked into the press room and Bubba got very emotional following his second-place finish. Is that good for the sport as a whole, not just the fight with Denny, but that raw emotion and that appreciative emotion, especially when many are throwing out the silver spoon comments about Austin Dillon? Did that resonate with you guys, seeing Bubba get so choked up at the press conference? Whoever wants to jump in on that one.
Yeah, it's great that the guy shows emotion. I mean, I won that race down in Bronson, with only a handful of cars, and I got emotional because with the passing of my father, so it was great to see that, Bubba cares that much about what he's doing, and good for him that he's showing that emotion. It shows that he's all in and he's really into it, and you know what? Even seeing Denny Hamlin yelling at Bubba after the race for something that happened with them on the track shows me that Denny still cares. That there's getting to a time where I didn't think Denny even cared anymore. He was just doing it for the paycheck. And now to see the emotion come out of him, it shows that he's really into it still too. So yeah, it's great when race car drivers show emotion like that.
Well, do you think the Denny thing, like he still has to put on maybe a persona, especially after getting all the flack for dumping Chase back at Martinsville?
I think it's more of a Gibbs team. I know Gibbs is a real religious guy, and he's totally professional, and he doesn't really want his drivers acting up. There's times he gets mad at Kyle Busch for what he does, but no, I think Denny Hamlin was it was true emotion. He had a shot at winning the 500, and he finished third, and he wasn't happy after the race with something that happened with him and Bubba Wallace. I seen even after they crossed the line, they still wrecked each other, so they must have been pretty mad at each other.
Tamlin also caught a lot of flack over the last couple of weeks because of an interview that he did with Pardon My Take, which is a podcast hosted by the Barstool Sports Network, where Hamlin was quoted as saying that he believes that up to 70% of active NASCAR drivers take Adderall or some other type of attention-focusing prescription. He didn't say whether or not they were prescribed or not. But
but wasn't that what Allmendinger was suspended for?
Yes, that was back in 2011.
Was it Ritalin or Adderall?
It was for Allmendinger, according to him. This wasn't from a NASCAR release, but from an interview that Allmendinger did. He said it was prescription Adderall that he was taking mixed with another drug that produced a false positive. But that also relates to something that Bubba said in a post-race interview where he said, "Oh, maybe it's the Adderall talking for Denny or something like that," when he was rather frustrated.
Now, did Bubba say that after Denny yelled at him in the pits, or was that before?
It seems like it was after. After they came out together.
What Denny was mad about is that comment he made, but maybe Bubba said that after Denny yelled at him because he was mad at Denny.
Now, with that, we're going to head on to Atlanta, which is a totally different racetrack, 1.5 mile intermediate speedway with extremely worn racing surface. Remember, last year, Atlanta made the decision following the Cup race there last March that they were going to repave the track, and then everybody begged them not to. And they elected not to. So let's see if it pays off with good racing. And also,
it's bumpy, right?
Well, it's bumpy. It's abrasive. It wears the tires out. Everybody's sliding around. I think we had 9 cars in the lead lap at the end of the race last year or 2 years ago. So it kind of produces an old school style of racing. And considering that we just saw an old school finish with the 3 and the 43 on top of the pylon, I'm curious, is this where we start to see who's going to be a threat this season? Is Atlanta the real season opener after the 500?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think this is where we're going to see the smaller teams show that they're a small team and the large teams show that they're a large team. I really think we're going to see the difference here. The cream is going to rise to the top at Atlanta, and the other people are going to sink a little bit. So it's going to be exciting to see what teams are for real when we get to Atlanta.
Which track was it that just dug up going into turn 1 to put that?
Richmond.
Oh, it was Richmond? Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember for some reason. I thought it was Atlanta for a minute. That's me not being a stat or track paying. I pay attention to nothing. I need Adderall.
I know. One more item before we completely shift our focus to Atlanta and next week, and then when we come, we'll take a quick break. We'll end up talking to Tim Riggleman about his experiences down in Florida. Scott, you kind of called this one. Entry list came out, 36 teams, all 36 chartered entries. Should NASCAR start to sweat it out a little bit, or is this what they wanted?
No, I think that's what they wanted. I mean, it was good. Like I said, the bank didn't take that one charter, and that team actually ran well, right? I think they finished 20th or 21st or something like that.
Great
so good for them. Maybe they made a little money where they can pay some of their debt off or whatever. But I mean, I'm serious. We were thinking that they weren't going to be there, and the charter itself wasn't going to be there, and it all worked itself out. They were there, and they ran good.
However, that team, BK Racing, did in fact file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy just prior to the start of the duels on Thursday. But like you said, Scott, they ran the whole race, got a top 20 finish with it, and it sounds like they're going to be in Atlanta as well. So we'll have to follow that story throughout the rest of the year. I believe Greg Galding will still be in the car come Atlanta. So with that, all top 3 NASCAR series have kicked off their season, will be in action at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. Saturday will be a doubleheader for the Xfinity and Truck Series, and then the Cup Series will be in action on Sunday. Final thoughts from Daytona 500 before we take a quick break. Anybody got anything?
Yeah, I mean, Josh joked, or not joked, he was pretty serious about it. He said Jeffrey Earnhardt would do 0 laps, like his number, 0 laps. Jeffrey ran great. I mean, he was up there. He did get a little scratched up in the last wreck, but he still. I mean, I think he was like 10th or 11th with about 20 to go, and he fell back to 14th for a while. I think he was scored at 21st at the end of the race, but for a very small team, they ran very well. Now, come Atlanta, do I think they're going to run that great? No, I think they're going to be a couple laps down, without a doubt, and they might even get lapped early. But no, I was very impressed with that team, and they ran well too. And Justin Marks finished 12th. I mean, what an incredible finish by him in that small team.
Yeah, Marks was climbing Mount Everest not that long ago.
Yeah, right.
Just a little tidbit for our listeners. Tyler Reddick did win the Xfinity race, and Johnny Sauter won the truck race. Truck race was fantastic. We don't have time to talk about it, but if you haven't watched it, you need to watch it, or else you're missing out.
I tell you what, all the racing at Speed Weeks was good, and the Daytona 500 was very good. I mean, we watched it with a live audience at River Rock, and the people were cheering and screaming. I mean, it was really good. People were really into the race. Unfortunately, I heard the ratings were down. The TV ratings were way down for the 500, which is a shame because it was a great race.
I was actually surprised to hear. I saw that same thing, Scott, but I was really surprised about that. I was going to say, it was an awesome event. Being at River Rock, doing the live show. I had a blast hanging with you guys. Not you, Sam. But it was a lot of fun. I'm so excited to be going back April 29th for Talladega, doing another live show there. So make sure you guys mark your calendars. We're going to have a lot of fun. And seriously, like you said, with the people hooting and hollering and everything, I remember when Kyle Busch got the flat and was the place erupted. People laughing or clap. It was all the emotions come out, and everybody, we're all friends there. So it was just a really cool atmosphere. And I mean, I hope everybody had a good time because I certainly did. That's all I got.
It was an unbelievable time for all involved. And like I said, Scott, I had a blast calling the last few laps with you, even though I might have had a little buzz going, but it sounded pretty good.
A little.
So hope we do that again soon. So, okay, maybe more than a little, but that's what we do. It's actually, I just found an article that somebody was wearing that, and this is from a health and fitness article from the Associated Press, and then we'll take a break right after this. Study claims alcohol more important than exercise for living past 90. I'm going to outlive all you guys. So with that, we will take a break, and we come back on the other side. We're going to talk to Tim Riggleman about his experiences down south for Speed Weeks and all the work that he was doing on multiple race cars, including that of Eric Goodell, who he spots for on a regular basis. We'll also take some time to reflect on Sam Riggleman as well one more time as we look forward to this coming Saturday. We will honor him, and we'll talk about local racing as the Wall Stadium Speedway schedule is out and so much more. You're listening to the RPM podcast with Scott and Tim Riggleman, Josh Matthews, Sam Ballard Jr., and myself, Eric Brennan. We'll be right back.
Okay, now don't be mad.
You're listening to the RPM podcast.
It's not good.
Welcome back to the RPM podcast. I'm Eric Brennan with Sam Ballard Jr., Scott Riggleman, Josh Matthews, and our special guest for the week, Tim Riggleman, Scott's brother. And Tim, the Daytona 500 marked the end of Speed Weeks for 2018, and you were probably one of the busiest people that we know down there. Tell us all about what you had going on, and overall, how was your week? Aside from the obvious, of course, which we'll get into in a couple of moments, but on the racing side, how was it for you? Was it a good experience? You love going down there? Is that the highlight of your racing year?
Definitely. I've posted it many times on my Facebook. New Smyrna Speedway is my absolute favorite place to spot. For more than one reason. Sometimes it's a 35 lapper. There's no tire management. We got to worry about fuel. It's green flag and you go. And the guy with the biggest gun at the gunfight usually wins. Scott mentioned the other night the John Blewett race means a lot to me. The Richie Evans race means a lot to me. Favorite place to spot. We didn't have a very good week. We were trying something new with a new car. I'm a team player. If you don't try something new, you're never going to go faster. We might have played with that a little too long. Bought the Troyer car out, and we were good. But we were chasing electrical woes. We couldn't figure out something in the car kept shutting off, and it was one of those things you can't fix it if it's not broke. So everything when it broke, it would fire back up for no reason. So they really never did figure out why. So we battled that. We finished every night, and I think we finished fifth in points. It was medicine for me, from what happened with my dad. I was with my racing family. So I was good. I've been doing this a long time. I know there's ups and there's downs, and we had a mediocre week. We didn't, like I said, we finished every week, and it was okay. Really nothing to brag about after that.
Now, Tim, at New Smyrna, you say it's one of your favorite tracks to spot. Is it just because it's Speed Week itself, or do they have good facility there for spotters? Is there a good spotter stand? Is there a good visibility of seeing the track for when you spot at? How is the facility itself?
Well, first and foremost, it has an elevator, so that helps a lot.
Yes. So they do have an elevator at the back of the stands to get the spotters up?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can see perfectly up there. In years past, there's been 10 to 15 modifieds. This year there was 30, so there was 30 rats up there, as we like to call them,
Yeah. Now, was there enough room in the spotter stand for 30 spotters?
No. Joe Pelham.
Now, could you elect to move to a different location because it was so crowded up there, or do you have to be on the spotter
No, they got to
stand
be up there. They have a guy up there, a NASCAR official. It was so bad, Joe Pelham, who spots for Danny Bowen, was actually... I was leaning on the fence, and he was leaning on my back, so he could see the track. It was pretty bad. A couple fights up there.
Sounds a little weird.
Oh, God.
If you know Joe Pelham, it's a little weird, yeah. But I'm most comfortable up there, so it's, guys, I've been around for 20 years, so.
Now, Tim, on the national level, one of the big things that NASCAR's likely to do is try to come up with actual rosters for the teams, and all team members, including spotters, are to be identified. Is that a protocol that you have to go through as you approach the rest of the tour races on the year, or have they not brought that down to the regional racing level just yet?
Like where they fill out a form and they say I'm the official spotter? I don't know.
And
not that I know of. I know, like on the hero cards and stuff that NASCAR makes, it says that I am, so they are aware. We don't have hard cards like the 3 top NASCAR divisions, so no, I'm not. Like my thing says mechanic on it, my license. It doesn't say spotter, so there's not.
Now, Tim, what about like your headset? Do you have a 58 number on your headset so people know you're Eric Spotter, or is it pretty much the same group of guys you spot with every week?
I have a 58 on my. You're supposed to. But the NASCAR official that's been up there for 15 years knows who I'm spotting for. But you do. You have to have a number. They all have numbers. And I've seen some of the local, the more professional guys, they had like an armband on. You guys were talking about that?
That's new this year.
Yeah,
people are wearing armbands.
I don't know anything about that. I don't think we have to do that. So just one more thing for me to lose.
All right, you said You said New Smyrna is one of your favorite places to spot at. You did get a chance to go to a different track this year down in Florida over at the Bronson Speedway. And as Ann Young, the owner of the Bronson Speedway, says, her track is peanut butter and jelly. It's not steak and lobster. I noticed there was no receiver for you to listen to. They actually had a spot for you guys in the grandstands to spot from, and they had a track official standing with you guys and just answering your questions or telling you what he thought, like it wasn't a radio communication, kind of like real old school,
Mm-hmm.
How did you like that? did that work out for you too? Did you have a good vantage point to see the track from there? And how did it work not having a receiver?
Well, when I first started, they didn't have the receiver. We first started with NASCAR. I actually remember I was spotting for John for a couple years, and what's that track that they built? They don't race there anymore. That real fancy track they built up in New York. I can't.
Oh, Adirondack Speedway?
No, the other one. We only went there a couple times. Well, anyway, I'll think of it. And all of a sudden, the drivers being there, like, you got to have a scanner now to listen to NASCAR. And everybody's like, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no radio truck at that time, so nobody had scanners. But I had scanned it. Before that, the guy at Bronson, I think he left to get a hot dog once the green flag fell. I never saw him again. But I'm used to that. At Wall Stadium, I do wear my radio. I can listen to the tower. So it's kind of like that feel. The guy never said a word to me. I sat down in the grandstands. I couldn't see real good, but I could see good enough to spot. I didn't go up to where the superstars were,
Now, what is it like multitasking? If you got the driver yelling at you and you're trying to listen to a receiver.
I have 3 radios. I have my talk radio. I listen to myself because a lot of times there's radio issues, and if I can hear myself, then I know it's not me.
Right.
And it does help. And then I have a 3rd radio, which is NASCAR. And like under pit stops, it just all the NASCAR is talking, the crew chief's talking, the driver's talking, and I don't say anything. It can get hectic. You get used to it, NASCAR definitely helps, and I know Sam, he's a big official. A lot of people complain about NASCAR this, NASCAR that. When you go to the NASCAR race opposed to an open comp race, NASCAR is so much better. Everything's cut and dry. At Wall Stadium, sometimes those officials, they go nuts. They start yelling and cursing, and I'm like, okay, Jimmy Blewett's yelling, what are they saying? I'm like, I don't know. Just stay where you are for now. And
no, that is not me yelling on the Wall Stadium radio.
No, I understand.
Sam's not allowed to have a radio.
No.
But you get used to it like anything else.
Okay. I'm terrible at multitasking. That's why I kind of had to ask what that's like trying to listen to 3-4 people at once.
Now, Tim, we talk about big teams, small teams, good equipment, bad equipment. I'm assuming it's the same for the spotters. I guess there's good radios and bad radios. Now, the equipment you have, could you spot with your equipment at a 2.5 mile track, or is that only good for short track stuff?
No, I could use it. I don't have the digital radios like they use in cup racing, but I do have really good radios thanks to Waddell Communications. He takes really good care of me. Hot Pockets uses the same radios that I use, and he does all the big tracks and stuff.
So if you ever got called up to the big 3 series, like a truck race or Xfinity or a Cup, and you were asked to do like a Talladega or Daytona, you would feel confident in your equipment would work well on a track that size?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's the same as what they got. I don't have the $1 million headset like they got, but I don't need that.
I noticed too when I watch you spot sometimes in the grandstands. I notice a lot of spotters use the button on their headphone itself. I never see you pressing a button. Do you have a button in your pocket or maybe in your hand or something? You do it that way?
I have a LRD button in my hand down here where you can't see it because last thing I want to do is hold my hand up here for 2 hours. So.
Yeah, right. Okay. So
that button does work.
Said, that's part of having good equipment and bad equipment, right?
Yeah, why you wouldn't have a push to talk in this day and age, I don't really know.
It's something because from my experience at Wall Stadium, we have an official that I work with who has a microphone where it automatically kicks on when it senses noise that it's being spoken into. Vox. And it's the biggest pain in the ass because he'll be talking to one of our clients, one of our competitors, and all of a sudden it'll kick on, and we're hearing conversation about what he's going to have for dinner, or or what's going on at the track. I mean, I don't know if you've experienced any of that, Tim, but on an official line, it's a pain.
What's funny about Wall Stadium a lot of times, I guess it's maybe that mic, but there's a controversial yell. You can hear them, talking about it they're like watching the video, and they go, "No, he did this and he did that," and you can hear all that, and
A lot of times, I've been recording the receiver frequency to help with the add a little something to the factory stock videos. And a lot of times when we would hear Eric Graham, saying, blue flag, to whoever or whatever's going on, you could hear, maybe another official in the tower, saying something, or even. You'll hear Eric Brennan in the background because he's yapping away about
you hear
something.
Gary talking. Yeah.
But at the same time, if you listen to the radio broadcast, you also can hear Eric Graham, yelling at somebody to, under yellow to, 54 behind the 55, stuff like that. And it's amazing what the mics can pick up. And I was curious. Scott's been asking me a lot about the equipment. What brand?
Motorola.
All Motorola stuff. And is that basically across the board? Pretty much everybody uses Motorola.
Yeah, I don't know. They do have one. It's called the Black Box or something that's made in China.
Mm-hmm.
But they're garbage, and my guy doesn't even service them.
Okay.
So.
I've had.
Tim, what about the earphones? I noticed that they came out probably about 10 years ago now, or maybe even 15 years ago. They came out with noise cancellation earphones.
Yeah, they used to have the little battery on top. I actually used. It was Eddie Partridge had one. They were pretty cool. You would flick a switch and it would actually suck the earphones onto your head.
Yeah, I tried one on at a trade show, and when you normally put headphones on, you could still hear outside noise. As soon as you flip that switch, you couldn't hear nothing. There could be somebody screaming next to you, and you couldn't even hear them. It was pretty neat. I was just wondering if you used something.
I never had one, and I think it's phased out. I don't think there's too many people that use them. I think they had problems with the batteries going dead and all the other stuff. So, which one more thing to break?
Just two more spotter questions I want to ask him before we move on to is Daytona and Speed Week stuff. You say you carry 3 radios. Do you carry extra batteries with you in case a battery dies during the race?
I'm lucky if I even charge my batteries from week to week.
Yeah, right. I mean, people in the spotter stands ever get scrambled? Hey, I need a battery.
Well, I do have extra batteries, yes. If they're charged or not, I don't really know. They weren't charged for Florida, so the last time they were charged was for Thompson or probably Turkey Derby. But Waddell's up there every week. He's got everything you need. If something breaks, he fixes it right there in the spotter stand. So
Waddell's actually up in the spotter stand?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's impressive. That's good service.
I make sure that he has everything that I need. And
so you rely on him, for the spare parts.
Knock on wood, I haven't had a battery go dead in a long, long time.
Another thing we talk about is kids getting involved in racing. We talk about iRacing and kids go from iRacing to regular racing. We also notice the way a lot of people are getting involved in racing now because they don't want to buy a race car. They want to be a spotter, know?
I understand that. Yeah, they're
I'm sure you're getting a lot of competition from younger kids wanting to do a spotter. Maybe they'll work cheaper. I was just wondering if there's a kid listening to our show and they want to be a spotter. What kind of cost is it? How much does it cost to get a good radio, a good headset? Do the spotters own their own radios and headset, or is it something the teams own?
I own my own because I've been to many. Especially when John was still racing, he would race one car one week and another car next week. You drive 4 hours to go to spot for this guy. You get up in the spotter stand and the battery goes beep, 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 beep as soon as you get up there. I have my own stuff because I know it works. A lot of people, I suggest you have your own thing. Some people don't. They use their team, but most of the mainstream spotters have their own stuff.
What would be the cost of something like that if they want to buy 3 radios like you have and extra batteries? And I'm assuming you carry everything in some type of bag to haul the stuff up into the spotter stand.
Yeah.
I see some of the spotters going up the stands. They have bags. They even have bottles of water with them and stuff like that.
There's ones out there with seats. They got seats in them now, the spotters bags.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I'm a little too big for those. I don't think that would hold me. But
you would too.
If I had to guess, 3 radios and everything, probably $2,500.
Wow.
So you're estimating your equipment that you bring to the track every week is $2,500.
Yeah. I mean, that's buying everything brand new.
Now, does this, electronics get outdated? Are you still using maybe the same electronics you used when you did spot for John, or have you every couple of years you have to update?
I never used the headset after John passed. I never used that headset again. I still have it. I've been through 3 headsets since then, because, different ports. 3 radios, you have to have 3 ports. Back in those days, there was no technology for that. The headset I got now, Hot Pockets actually gave me, so I'm using a hand-me-down one. But I've been through 4 headsets since I've started.
We're talking to Tim Riggleman, who was a longtime spotter, most notably in the modified division. And Tim, rotor racing is a people sport, and the level of trust that is required on all levels, not just from driver and team and driver and mechanic, and even feedback from crew chief to driver and vice versa. I think there is no more important relationship in terms of trust than between a spotter and a driver. And I've heard your name mentioned many times in Victory Lane at Wall Stadium Speedway. And I'm curious to you, on the other side of the fence, how important is that relationship between yourself and your driver, and how long does it take to build that level of trust?
Well, the easiest way is to go back to the beginning. Everybody always asks me, how did you get started? Scott just asked, how does a person get started? How I got started is mine, Scott's story is the same. We grew up at Wall Stadium in New Egypt, and I became really good friends with John, and when he started to be about 17, he's like, listen, I'm going to race next year. I want you to be around, and, at the Blue Witch, you got to be there. You got to be at the garage, or they're not going to take you racing with them. So, make a long story short, I'm like, anybody that knows me, I don't want to work. I don't want to mow my own lawn, let alone go to somebody's house and work on their race car. So Scott's like, John's like, well, we'll make you a spotter. And that was just in its infancy, Make a long story short, John's like, Grandpa Timmy's going to be my spotter. I'm like, Grandpa's like, no, he's not. He don't know what he's doing. So I had the spot for John Jr. his last year at Wall. And I ended up getting my first win with John Jr. John Jr. made me the spotter I am today. He was 35, 40 laps at Wall Stadium back in the day. He'd key that mic on the green flag and yell at me through the whole race. But he taught me how to spot. So then I got with John, and of course he trusted me. And then, after that, I guess I just got a reputation. Like a lot of people ask me, okay, say if you were a spotter, how does Josh spot? I'm like, I don't know. I never hear any other spotters. Do you know what I'm saying? You got to ask the drivers. So I'm just trying to figure out.
That is a good question, though, because they do have on NASCAR radio now where you can tune to a channel and listen to Jimmy Johnson and his spotter. I was just curious, have you ever done that?
I listen to Winston, Kyle Busch on Sirius once in a while, and Freddie.
Now, have you ever learned anything by listening to Tony Hirschman, Matt Hirschman's brother?
No. Well, quick story. After John passed, I was done racing. That was it. I was going to be done. Instead of going to Florida for speed weeks, we went the week. At least I want to go down the week before. I don't want to go down for cars. So on the way home, all the haulers are passing us going the other way, and that little fire is flickering. Like, I still want to do this. A couple weeks later, Ed Bennett calls me. He goes, Matt Hirschman's going to call you. I'm like, all right. So Matt called me. He goes, I'm going to run the tour. Winston can't spot. I want you to spot for me. And I'm like, okay, give me a couple days. And he was like, I'm like, a couple days went by. I go, why do you want me to spot? He goes, because we've listened, they've listened to people on the radios and stuff, and Winston wants you to do it. So I spotted for Matt for 4 years, something like that. We got all the 4 wins, 5 wins. He quit. And then I'm like, I'm not one of those guys that I'm not begging for another job. If it happens, it happens. And so he went to go do whatever he's doing now, not doing the tour. Eric Rudolph called me. He goes, I want you to spot for me. And Eric was like 16, and I'm like, okay. I go, I'm used to spotting for veterans, not really kids. He's like, oh, we'll be all right. That was the best. He was like the fountain of youth for me. It made me want to be at the racetrack again. And we got a win at Spencer, and then I went with Jimmy. Jimmy made it 3/4 of the season. Grandpa quit after they took the win away from him at Riverhead that time. Matt Hirschman called me again. I'm going to run the last 2 races. So we did that. I'm like, all right, I'm done again, Go to Florida for speed weeks. Scooter Flores works for Eric Goodale. I don't know if you guys know Scooter or not. It's Ryan Flores' cousin. Okay. He goes with the Goodales racing. He got hooked up with him. I'm in Florida at the beach house. Scooter calls me and goes, Eric Goodale needs a spotter for tonight. His spotter can't be here tonight. So I'm like, okay. Just pay my way and I'll do it. So I did it for like 2 nights. And like a month later, their crew chief calls me and goes, we want you to spot for us. So I got that job and I've been there ever since. As far as to answer your question, I guess they trust me. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As far as Wall Stadium, Cecily knows what I'm going to say before I say it. And he's going to do what I tell him to do before I even tell him to do it. Like, we work really good together. And Jimmy, too. So, yeah, I guess they trust me. I'm just fortunate to still be doing it,
It also becomes, you're reliable too. I mean, they trust you on the radio, but they also trust that you're going to be there and you're going to be there on time. And they know when they roll down on the track and turn their radio on, you're going to be on the other side of the radio. I'm sure there's other spotters that probably maybe don't even show up sometimes and aren't reliable. So, I mean, being reliable and on time, right, Eric, is very important.
I was just saying.
That's fine.
I can attest to it because he was actually here before even Sam or Scott signed on, and then we sat for another I don't know how long waiting for Eric. So,
but Tim, like there's times you go to a race like New Hampshire and there's other divisions there. Do you ever spot for other divisions other than the modifieds? Maybe if you're on a modified race and a K&N cars are there, have you ever drifted over to the K&N side or maybe a truck or Xfinity or maybe even Cup? Have you ever, did anything other than? I know you spotted for me when I ran my arch truck and stuff like that. I was just wondering if you ever spotted for any of the other NASCAR divisions, such as a truck or Xfinity or a K&N.
I always got the opportunity. I'm very fortunate that I know a lot of people who have gone on from the modifieds. They used to ask me, and I was always turn them down. Like, I could barely be up there for the modified race in 100-degree weather. I don't want to do that anymore. I did spot for, who was the kid from New Jersey that raced back in the day in the K&N series? I can't think of his name. I spotted for him a couple times.
Joey McCarthy?
No, I just spotted for him in the modified race somewhere. He was in somebody's backup car for something, not a modified race.
Are you talking about Ryan Seaman?
Yeah, I spotted for him a couple times. No, I'm just there for the modifieds. I don't even like when I go to Stafford and Thompson. People are like, who won the SK race? Who won the late model? I'm like, I don't know. I don't watch. It's not a modified race.
But you used to spot for SK races when you were at Thompson and stuff too,
yeah,
right?
I used to. I spotted for Tommy Cavino a lot. Rowan Pennick a couple times. It's John got a ride. Freddie Kraft did most of John's SKs, but yeah.
How about did he even spot for Teddy Christopher one time?
No, it never worked out. Teddy has a long line of people wanting to spot for him. We were supposed to spot for him once, and it never panned out.
So, can you just give us a quick list of names of people that you spotted for in the modified tour, or did you already do that? I know you mentioned
they're the
Eric Rudolph.
Yeah, they're my main drivers. Like I said, I spotted for Tommy a couple times, Cavino, Rowan a couple times. I really can't. I've usually been pretty loyal to the people I'm spotting for. That's really about it on the tour that I can think of.
So other than the modified race, you would be. You were checking out. Let's say it was a Wall Stadium evening, and the modifieds go, and then the factories of the 4-cylinders come out. You're checking out.
I watch. If anybody knows me, I bring this exact chair and I sit behind the grandstand. I get up for the modified race and I watch Scott's race. The other ones I watch turns 1 and 2.
Okay.
And if the fans don't yell and scream, then I know there's nothing going on, and wait for them to come back around again.
Now, same question I asked you before. I asked you if you're in New Hampshire if you spot for the other divisions. What about Wall Stadium? Will you spot for a late model guy or maybe a sportsman guy while you're at the track?
Yeah, if I believe they're capable of
listening to you.
Yeah, I'm not going to spot. I don't mean to be arrogant, but I'm not going to spot for somebody that's not capable of winning, like someone that's been there 1 or 2 times. I'm not a driver coach. I'm more of a veteran kind of guy. I can't say, well, you're going in too deep or blah, 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 stuff like that. I have spotted for people at Wall. I spotted for a lot of people at Wall. You included.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I can't really think of anybody off kilter that I had spotted for.
Now, what's your plan this year? Are you going to do the whole tour again with Eric Goodale? Or are you going to do some of those MRS races or maybe even tri-track races with Eric? Or does he have a different spotter for those other tours and you just do the NASCAR tour?
I basically am lucky enough where I get to pick and choose the ones that I want to go to, and then he'll find somebody for the other ones. I'm definitely committed to the whole tour, except for Bristol. It's the middle
because it's a midweek show, right? That's a little tough for you to
my
get
wife,
to.
with the wife and kids working in school, it's not worth it to them to take off. So Hot Pockets does that. The bad side about that is Eric won there with Hot Pockets, so I hear about it all the time.
So sitting home, are you happy or are you a little jealous that they got the win and then you're not celebrating the victory lane with them?
I'm happy for them. It's okay. I've been there, done that. This day and age, you can watch it on the computer. For the 45 minutes it's on the computer, I'm wishing I was there. But as soon as the checkered flag drops, I'm like, now I'm glad I don't have to drive home 8 hours, 12 hours. So
now you just brought Bristol up. A lot of racers love Bristol and they really look forward to going there. Now, do you get hyped up as a spotter, saying, "Oh wow, I'm going to Bristol. I'm going to be spotting at a track like Bristol"? Was that fun for you when you did spot there?
I'm always excited to spot at a new track ever. Wherever it is, it could be Bronson Speedway. First time I was ever there. I like Bristol. Bristol is like a big wall stadium. A lot of people were stressed out about it. I was comfortable there. It's like a big wall stadium where I learned how to spot. The closing rate's the only thing you got to worry about there. You got to be like, whoa, boy, whoa, and they're right up on top of you. But I only went to Bristol a couple times. I went with Jimmy and Eric Rudolph. That was it.
So, now, what about Richmond? Have you ever spotted at Richmond?
Yeah, for John.
Yeah.
I like Richmond. I wish we would go back to Richmond.
What about Martinsville? Were you ever at Martinsville?
Oh, yeah, with John,
yeah.
Eric Rudolph. And that's where I first started spotting for Cecily. John was there, and there was like 65 cars there, and Cecily didn't make it through time, and they had like a non-qualifiers race, and they took the top two, and it was like 40, 35 cars in that. Reggie Ruggiero was in it, and John's like, "Hey, you want to do me a favor? You want to spot for my buddy Anthony?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Who's Cecily?" He's like, "Yeah." So I never met the kid, went down there. Frankie Ward was the crew chief, I guess. I go, "John wants me to spot for you." He's like, "Okay." And he's like, "Thank you." And I'm like, "Do they call you Anthony? Do they call you Tony? What do they?" He's like, "Just call me whatever you want." I'm like, "I'm going to call you Boy. That's easy enough." And he went out there and he finished second to Reggie.
L.W. Miller?
L.W. Miller. Second to Reggie, and he qualified. And then that's how I got hooked up with him at Wall after John passed away.
Now, I know a lot of race car drivers, they get excited when they go to a cup, even though they're in a modified, they're going to a cup track, like a bigger NASCAR track, like a Bristol, Richmond, Martinsville, New Hampshire. Do you get more excited when you go to these tracks, or you have the same enthusiasm as going to a Thompson or a Stafford?
Like I said, if it's a new track, I'm excited. After I've been there, they're all basically the same for me. I do like New Hampshire because of the draft. John had a lot of success there. I like the bowlings. I love going to Riverhead. I love it. People, we gotta go to Riverhead. I love Riverhead. Riverhead, there's 2 lanes. You can definitely pass there. I get more nervous watching you race your factory stock than I do for any modified race because I can't talk to you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. I bet there's times you're watching, you're like, "Oh, I wish I could tell him this guy's looking on his inside or looking to the outside," or there's, you probably see a wreck happen in front of me. You're probably wishing you could tell me, "Oh, wow, there's a wreck in front of you." You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Now, actually, that actually brings me to something. Now, obviously, I've only ever seen things about you as a spotter. Basically, I only saw stuff about you because of Facebook and being friends with Scott and this great community and family that you've built, and very well respected spotter. But you watch your brother out there racing with the factory stocks. You are around racing, pretty much your whole life. Mm-hmm. And are you totally okay with just being a spotter, or have you ever gotten the itch that I want to try that?
I raced a race car one time for like 10 laps, and this is another story. I got a phone call from John. He's like, "Get ready, boy, I'm coming over with the late model." I'm like, this is when he was building his late model for Flemington. So whatever. New Egypt Speedway is closed down. There's weeds growing up through it. He goes, I got the key to New Egypt Speedway. I'm like, okay. So he shows
This
up.
is when New Egypt Speedway was asphalt, of course,
Yeah, it was
right?
asphalt. Yes, it was closed. There were, like I said, there was weeds. You couldn't see the one side of the track to the other. The weeds were so bad. And I'm like, what are we gonna do here? He's like, I gotta make sure this car doesn't leak. I'm like, okay. I gotta take it to Flemington on Saturday. So we get there and the track's filthy dirty. So he does a couple laps, gets his track cleaned off. Then he's going faster and faster. And I actually had the video camera that I was talking to you about earlier.
Right.
If I could find I have video of it. He's like, you want to take the car out? And I've never driven anything in my life. Never really wanted to. He's like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. So I started doing like 4 or 5 laps. I was probably doing 30 miles an hour. Felt like I was doing 50, 60.
Were you in full racing gear, fire suit, helmet, gloves,
I had
shoes?
sweatpants on, a T-shirt. John didn't even have his stuff on. It was like right out of the junkyard clothes. And so I'm like, hell, this ain't that hard. And so I started going a little faster. I'm like, this isn't hard at all. So I punched it coming out of 4, and the car went like this. And I'm like, oh, boy, here we go. And I straightened it out. I come around the next lap. John comes running out of the grandstands like,
playtime is over with.
You're all done. That was the only time I ever raced a car. No, Scott's the racer of the family. He always has been. I never had
that goes back to being kids. We used to race bicycles in my parents' backyard. Tim did have a go-kart when we were kids. He did race go-karts in the backyard. But even when we raced bicycles in the backyard and on the street, Tim was the flagger. Tim loved flagging back then. We always thought Tim was going to be a flagger, but he ended up taking the spotter route. Do you ever wish you would have become a flagger, Tim? Because you were good at it when we were kids.
Yeah, I would have definitely done it at one point in time. I actually think the flagger is now is like.
Yeah, we talked about this on a show a couple of weeks ago. We think the flagger is really going to be non-existent.
Yeah. I think if anything, he's the scapegoat now.
Yeah, right.
Back in the day when we went to Wall Stadium, Tyrone made the calls on the flag stand.
Yeah, it's not like that.
And now it's a guy in the tower, and people were throwing beer bottles and booing the flagger. It's not. He's not.
Yeah, that was the good old days. They used to throw sodas and beers at him when they black flag somebody.
Yeah.
Same with you being a race director. Do you make all the calls, or do you let your flaggers make the calls at the go-kart races?
I work with 2 other race directors at the karting track, and we spread ourselves evenly amongst the track. And if we don't see it, we go ahead and we ask the rest of them. But usually the calls are made out of the race directors, not the flag.
So if someone gets black flagged or something like that, you actually tell your flagger to black flag them, the race director tells them?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well,
so
Scott's
we were
been
talking
able
about
to be
that,
I would say Scott's been able to be an announcer, a racer, a flagger.
Done everything.
Yeah. What haven't you done?
Tow truck guy. I was a tow truck guy on the racetrack. I never did tech yet. I haven't done tech inspections yet, but everybody thinks that once I'm done with my racing, I'm going to be drugged into
you've been in tech enough that I think you could probably
handle
that.
Yeah. But I like Tim does all the NASCAR, modified NASCAR races on the tour. I have friends that are tour officials, and they're like, hey, whenever you're ready to sign up with us, let us know. I don't know if that's something I'm going to be doing. I think once I'm done driving, I'm going to be done racing. I'm just going to go off camping. But yeah, no, I enjoy all aspects of the racing, and I have spotted too. There was times when John and Jimmy were racing, it was like brother versus brother because Tim and John were hooked up with each other. Tim was spotting for John, and I would spot for Jimmy. So it was like the younger brothers versus the older brothers. We used to have a lot of fun with that. I enjoyed spotting too.
Going back to the flagger at the tour races is still relevant. He starts the race and he puts the yellow. NASCAR say put it out, but you have to wait for him to put it out so you don't get run into in the back. That spotter's still relevant.
Yeah, but like when you go to a track like New Hampshire and it's a mile, how much do you actually really pay attention to the flagger? I mean, once you hear NASCAR getting ready to tell the flagger to throw a yellow, aren't you already kind of warning your driver the yellow is going to be coming out here?
Yeah. With any luck, the wreck is nowhere near you. You got plenty of time to slow down. They just say put it out. That's all they say. That we know that the yellow's coming out.
Now, when you are spotting at a track like New Hampshire, because of the size of it, New Hampshire's a mile track for people listening. It's a very big racetrack. Once you go over to the spotter stand, do you stay there the whole day, or do you actually go back and forth to the pits?
I go back as much as I can. If there's a half hour between it, we'll go down underneath and hang out. But the schedule has been, they've tried to shorten everything, so we're there we're up at the spotter stand at 7:30 in the morning for practice. And then we don't usually qualify to 1 or 2 or whatever, so I usually go down and then I'll send somebody up. You have to have a spotter for qualifying, but I don't usually go up there. Winston usually does it for me. Now, Tony Hirschman's up there from 7:30 in the morning until the track closes every day. I don't know how he does it, but he usually fills in for me for qualifying, so I don't have to go back up there. And then I'm good till race day.
So much going on with Tim Riggleman and his spotting duties. And, gentlemen, I understand that even though Speed Weeks was great on the racing side, of course, the sudden passing of the family patriarch of the Riggleman family, your father, Sam. This Saturday, we're going to be having a memorial mass for him. Just want to give you both an opportunity to shed some light on that subject and just reflect on the life and legacy of Sam Riggleman once more.
You want to start? Go ahead, Scott.
We are going to have a memorial service at Higgins Funeral Home in Freehold from 3 to 5. We are going to have a small family party at Woody's, for immediate family only. But we're also inviting other people. They can come back to Woody's. We're going to be in a separate room, but we'll be walking out to the bar and stuff. We are trying to get the Filmer brothers to come show videos during the memorial service. So, it's definitely going to have a racing feel for it. If you know my father through racing or anywhere and you want to come, we welcome everybody. It should be a good time. My dad did get me and Tim started in racing. Most families played soccer, football, they took their kids camping. My dad did take us camping, but it was camping at the racetrack. Some of the fondest memories I have of my childhood with Tim and my father is camping at the Race of Champions at Pocono. We'd go up there on a Thursday and stay till Monday, and it was great times back then. If it wasn't for my father, we probably wouldn't have got involved in racing. I'm glad he showed us racing, and we introduced a lot of other families in Farmingdale to racing because of it. Shannon Connor's one, his son Cody races and probably Connor raced, and I tell Cody Connor all the time, I said, you're only a good late model race car driver now because of me. He's like, well, what do you mean by that? You've never turned a wrench on my late model. I said, your father didn't even know what racing was until my father took him to the races, and that's what got his family involved in racing. So my dad was good at showing people racing and bringing them to the racetrack,
For what it's worth, Tim and Scott, I haven't been involved in racing, at least on the short track level, very long. I didn't start even going to the track until 2009 and, didn't start racing until I think, 2011. And, it's been an incredible experience. And, with my son being born in 2012, and we brought him to the track, of course, and, he's been able to see me race and all that. His first ever racing bit of memorabilia is a little like a Matchbox car that we bought from your father at the track there. So that was, that's a way to start off his little collection there. So
that's pretty cool. Another thing I want to tell you, Josh, too, is a long time ago, I think I gave you a set of tires or something like that. And he said, oh, it was nice. You gave Josh a set of tires. And she always asked me, how was your dad as a racer? How did he do and all that stuff. And the time I gave you that set of tires, I said to Nancy, I said, you know why I gave Josh that set of tires? She's like, no, I don't know why you gave Josh that. I said, he reminds me of my father. The way you raced and the way my father raced is like identical. You showed up to have a good time. Your cars were a little rough around the edges. Your trailer was a little rough around the edges. The truck you towed it there was a little rough around the edges. But you go out and you do a good job. And that's exactly the way my dad raced. Tim could tell you. We'd watch my dad work on the car right in the driveway and last minute load it up and go to the track. And, he would never really win a feature or anything like that, but he could win a heat race and he could finish in the top 10. And at the end of the night, he would have a beer with everybody and have a good time. He told us that about racing. It wasn't all about winning, just going and have a good time.
That means a lot, Scott. And you are exactly on point. There have been a number of times when we didn't get the motor fired up after we would be rushing to get it back in the car the night before opening day, and we would fire up for the first time at 2 a.m. opening day.
My dad, he worked a full-time job. and he would come home and he would tinker on his race car, and hopefully he had enough money and the car was ready to go racing on Saturday, And even the way he drove on the track, racing with you, Josh, it just reminded me so much of my father. He just did the best he could with what he had and had a good time doing it. And some weeks he did well, and some weeks the car fell apart on lap 2. You know what I'm saying?
That's not my God. That's not my God.
Oh, that really means a lot. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. The way I remember my dad as far as racing goes is, like Scott said, he worked a full-time job, taking care of us. We never went out. We never went without shoes or eating. Everything was always taken care of first. But there was a time where he raced New Egypt on Friday night, Wall Stadium on Saturday, and then Atlantic City Speedway on Sunday. Like, he was diehard. And there'd be times we were at New Egypt. New Egypt would rain out, and he goes, all right, let's go to East Windsor. They're still racing. They race in the rain. And we used to take the race car right from there and go. He was always, it was always about the racing. So,
and Josh, that's another thing that reminded you of my dad, is that one time you showed up from Bridgeport and your car was filled with mud, and I remember Lisa sitting there with a garbage can scraping all the mud out of it. And
technically, that was Hartwig's car that he loaned me.
Yeah, right. But like Tim said, my dad would run New Egypt, which was a quarter mile on Friday night, right? Then he would run Wall Stadium Saturday night with a third mile, and then he would go to Atlantic City, which was a half mile on Sunday. Me and Tim were kids. We're riding down there in a pickup truck. I wasn't thinking gear ratios or nothing back then when I was a kid. But then when I got older, sitting with my father, I'm like, Dad, you ran 3 different tracks and 3 different nights. I'm like, did you change gears or anything? He's like, no, I wouldn't change gears. He's like, at New Egypt on the quarter mile, I didn't have enough gear. At Wall Stadium, I had the perfect gear ratio. But then when we went to the half mile at Atlantic City, the motor would scream. He would just, whatever the car would do, that's how he would race it, So I thought that was a pretty cool story. And back then, he said he actually made money with the car because, things were a lot cheaper back then. And, he'd make $100 at New Egypt. He'd make $100 at Wall. Maybe he'd get $125 down at Atlantic City. He'd make $325 when his real job. That's what he was making a week. So it's something he was actually making money with a race car for a little while,
Wow. And that's really, you don't really hear that at all these days. Until you get into, the top, maybe ARCA, but or K&N, but, anything lower than that, modifieds or whatever. You're not making money.
But I remember that story Tim just told. We were at New Egypt one night on a Friday night and it rained out. And I thought we were going home early. He loaded us up in the truck and it wasn't the way home. I'm like, Dad, where are we going? He's like, we can still make East Windsor. So we went from a quarter mile asphalt track over to a half mile dirt track, and he made it there in time. They were racing. We unloaded the car. He went out on the track and raced dirt that night. I thought that was pretty cool.
Now what kind of division? Would it have been at each of these tracks?
It was called modern stocks back there. Basically a street stock like now. It was modern stocks. There were a lot of wedge bolts and stuff like that, but they were modern stocks. Another thing about my father is he started, him and his friends started a club called the Street Stockers Racing Club, and they raced at New Egypt, and they traveled out. He traveled to Evergreen all the time, and it was a club. And they raced a turkey derby at Wall. Wall didn't have street stocks yet. They just had the modern stock division, and they went to a turkey derby as the Street Stockers Racing Club. Well, the track liked it so much, Wall Stadium liked it so much, they started the street stock division based on the club that my dad had started. So that was a pretty good side note that, technically my dad started the street stock division at Wall Stadium.
That's a great side note, really. Showing the involvement that especially even because you were talking about, you have your local or regional stuff, and then you have your national stuff, and that's a hell of an impact to have in the region to have basically started a division at a track, especially a fame track.
Were very popular then. There was a lot of racing clubs back then. There was modified racing clubs. There was still the TQ midget racing clubs. My dad just had an idea to start a Street Stockers Racing Club, and it worked well. They did it for many years. And their big thing was they wanted to compete at a high level at Pocono for the Race of Champions. So they figured if they started a club and it was the same rules as the Race of Champions, they could build a car for the Race of Champions. They could race New Egypt and Evergreen. They did like 5 races at each, and then their big finale race was the Race of Champions, which was pretty cool.
Right.
It's going to be.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Josh.
No. Go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say it's going to continue to be interesting to hear some of these stories, Scott and Tim, especially as we get closer to Saturday. And once again, all that information, we'll have it posted up on our RPM Podcast Facebook page And I'll be seeing you all there for sure because Sam was just an incredible guy, and he'll be missed. But I'm happy to say that I know and I'm friends with you guys because you're all just like him. The love and passion for racing is there, but so is that big old heart that Sam had. So
since the viewing's 3 to 5, Eric, we should see you about 5:15. You think? We'll see Eric there when I see the memorial stickers Elliot's making for us too. Then Eric and the memorial stickers will show up at the same time, just as everybody's walking out.
Oh my goodness, I'll be there bright and early.
And one last thing I want to say too. I'm sure Tim knows this too. It's come as you are. My dad was a come as you are guy. You don't have a suit. You don't have nice clothes. You got dirty work clothes. Just show up the way you are. You know, we're fine with it.
That's fine.
No one cares what your appearance is.
Look at me. This is what you get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wearing a suit because I have one. But like I said before,
you're
if
wearing
gotta
a
work
suit
to
because
2
you're
o'clock,
skinny now.
You're an oil changer guy, and you want to come at 3 o'clock. Just come right from work. We don't care. Come as you are.
Yeah, I just before we get off the subject of my father, I just want to. I haven't had the opportunity to thank anybody. Overwhelming. You know, like Scott said the other night. Scott's like, I'm going to put something on Facebook, and I just wasn't going to do it just yet. And I knew when Scott put it on because my phone just went off the hook. People at home, people didn't understand why I wasn't coming back, stuff like that. But then I got to the track, and, you know, my second family, and I'm not going to name anybody because I'm not a name dropper, but a lot of people came up to me and, you know,
Tim, we're name droppers here. If you know someone famous, drop their name, please.
Well, I can get to that in a minute. So I went to Bronson. And basically the same people that told Scott. I got to Smyrna, and everybody was, saying the thing. I got to the spotter stand where I seen a lot of my good friends. And I'm up there, and you want me to name drop? There was Tony Hirschman, Freddie Kraft, who spots for Bubba now, and Mike Herman, he spots for a Cup guy. I think it might be Ricky Stenhouse. I'm not sure. They're like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I don't know. I go, I'm here by myself. He go, we want to take you out. And we couldn't go that night. The next night they had to be at the big track for night stuff. So we went, I think it was Wednesday, we went to Merck's, which is basically become the new Pub 44. Pub 44 changed hands, and the racers aren't really welcome there anymore. So we go to this new place, and we just sat at a table, and we told stories and talked about everything. And, these guys don't have to do that with me anymore. I'm just, very thankful that they still took the time out of their busy big track schedule to. We sat there till they kicked us out. It was 2:15, and, it's just family, racing family, and I'm just very appreciative of that. And I just wanted to mention that those guys took time out of their. And Hot Pockets was there. God forbid if I forget Hot Pockets. Hot
Pockets is real name Brian Kramer. Yeah, Brian Kramer. Who was Hot Pockets spotting for down there, Tim? I think he did the K&N race with Joe Graff, maybe?
Yeah, he did him all week. Super late model.
Oh, Joe Graff all week?
Yeah.
Do you guys know who Joe Graff is? Joe Graff's family used to own Bethel Motor Speedway, and now they sold the track, and they're concentrating on Joe Graff's racing career. He drove for Calabrese Motorsports, right? David Calabrese in the K&N race. Mm-hmm. And then they had their own late model down there, and they ran the whole weekend late models down there.
I remember the name from the Legend Car Turkey Derby events.
Right. Yeah, so, he was Legend Car driver. He's a young kid, right, Tim? He's not very old.
He's young to me. I don't know exactly how.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I don't know exactly how old he is. But yeah, they had a mediocre week. They could have done better. They could have done worse. But that's Speed Weeks for you.
As long as you can drive it on the trailer, that's how I look at it.
Now, Tim, another thing I noticed at Speed Weeks, and I think we even talked about it a little bit. The grandstands out in New Smyrna looked packed every night. Was there really good crowds every night?
There was very good crowds, but you got to remember that half the other side got blown over in the
blew down, right? Yeah, I was wondering that too. If a lot of people don't know, a hurricane went through there 3-4 years ago, Tim, and literally flipped some of the grandstands onto the racetrack, and they never replaced them.
They're in the process of it now. I actually rode up the elevator with the lady, the wife or the husband that own it, and there are concrete pads there. They couldn't get the permits in time. The grandstands are there. They just haven't put them up yet. They're waiting for permits. So
but there was definitely more people there this year than years past,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember too, the big track there wasn't something going on at the big track every night.
Yeah.
So yes, there was more cars bring more people. So there was 32 modifieds there, something like that.
That's a good count, especially for them. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago they were only getting 16. You know.
Oh, I know. I think short track racing's in good shape this year. Even by showing Bronson Speedway was packed, New Smyrna was packed. I mean, even locally here, all the racetracks are set and ready to go, and we haven't had that in a while. I mean, there's been times where we're wondering if Wall's going to open, we're wondering if Evergreen's going to open, we're wondering what Bridgeport's doing, what New Egypt's doing. They all got their schedules out, and they're all very aggressive schedules. I think we're going to have great local racing this year.
How do all you guys feel about Wall going back to the longer schedule?
I'm all for it, man. Let's go racing.
I won't be ready, but I have other issues that are part of that. But I'm fine with it.
I mean, pretty much really doesn't matter to Sam. We don't even know if he has a job there. So I don't think he's welcome to any of them. So it doesn't matter if there's
you want to know what though? Stephen Reed, who is an ex-friend of Eric Brennan's, offered me a spot on his crew. And you want to know why that is? Because I actually respond back to his text messages, and I actually show up on time, unlike host Eric Brennan. And I'm sure if Stephen Reed had a Facebook, he'd share our videos, unlike Eric Brennan. So I mean, it's a great time.
So now, Sam, I'm hoping you have a position at Wall Stadium, and I really think you do still have your position at Wall Stadium. But if you don't, would you move to maybe a crew guy or maybe a spotter, or would you just go somewhere else and try to get a job as an official?
Oh no, I mean I'm down. I love Wall Stadium. I mean I love Eric Brennan, but I'm willing to change the garbages at Wall Stadium, and I told Diane that, so maybe that's what she's thinking.
Oh my goodness! In my position, I'm okay with the season. Could be 12 months long, and I'd still be okay with it. So
that's because you're inside. You get fed.
Yeah, right.
You get air conditioning.
Makes money when he goes there. We spend money when we go there. But
yeah, tell me about it.
I like the new schedule. Like Tim said, we've been around racing forever. It is a longer schedule, but it's more what I'm used to. It was the shorter schedules I wasn't used to. I've always been always liked the long schedule, so we'll see what happens. Plus, you got to remember, you got rain outs and stuff. And one thing about racing in April, there is a lot of rain in April, and April showers bring many flowers. So, first couple might even get rained out. You never know,
I will tell you and put it in the books, I am hoping for a rain out on the season finale, October 6th. I have a wedding that day. So
you said you were going at the live show. You said you were not going to it.
No, the one on Memorial Day weekend I'm not going to. That's Indy 500 day. Oh. But the other one, I'm a groomsman, and I can't miss it. So
Eric, I understand you're a super important guy, but if you go to this wedding on October 6th and the races happen, I think they'll go off no problem without you being there. So you might.
I know, and it's going to be very painful for me to know that. So it's
okay.
Oh my.
All right, on that
note,
on that note, what have we learned today, Sam?
I learned that come October 6th, Scott Riggleman will take over for announcing for Eric Brennan. Oh, God. Because I just said it.
Yeah, he'll have already clinched the championship by then, I'm sure. Scott, what have you learned?
I learned on October 6th, if I'm lucky enough to win the championship again, I'll be getting interviewed by the A team and not the B team in Victory Lane this year.
I'm getting roasted lately.
Tim, what have you learned today?
I've learned two things. First, thank you guys for having me. Like I've told you all before, this was always something that John wanted to do, and I finally got to do it and learned how to do that. Second thing is I learned, as my brother told me, don't rush to get down there. It's not gonna go off on time. So he was right about that.
Eric, what have you learned?
I'm sorry.
Eric.
Well, for one, I'm a terrible human being. But for two, I actually did learn that Tony Hirschman is Matt's brother. And that was beaten in the man today. No, and I learned that Scott's a name dropper. So,
geez.
Tim, is it Anthony Hirschman III?
Yeah, I guess apparently the race car driver
so
Tony. He never really
Jr.
went by Junior, I guess. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Today I learned that Petty has outdated garbage.
No, their schools do. They're not their race team. Their schools.
Semantics.
Not now.
I also learned that we don't know enough about Danica's fluids. No, you don't remember?
She sells wine. She sells wine, folks.
No, what she was sliding in while she couldn't avoid the wreck. Anyway,
we got it, Josh. We got it.
Eric seemed confused. Eric looked confused. I learned that.
I'm always confused.
New Smyrna has a rat problem.
Yes.
And I also learned that Tim has a button where you can't see it.
I got a couple of those.
Oh, my goodness. Tim, thank you for coming. You're welcome to come back every week if you want. You know, it's I love to, tap more into the side of the sport that you're into. I really appreciate it.
We have a quick shout out to a legend car driver.
Yes, Kyle Dealman, who was one of the Patreon. Am I saying that correctly? Patreon? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
All right, one of the.
That's
the
how
Patreon
out of touch with the world Eric is. It's Patreon, yes.
In all seriousness, go check out our website, therpmpodcast.com. There's a donate tab. This podcast will keep going on, but with your support, we can get bigger and better things, like a new host.
Yes, very important. And actually, part of that is we're going to tease that we're going to do some bonus segments for you guys that'll be uploaded separately, shorter little bits that hopefully will keep you laughing at Eric Brennan. But that's about that's about all I got for today, guys. Eric, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess I'm fired. So on behalf of Tim Riggleman, who was with us today, Scott Riggleman has been doing great the last couple of weeks. Scott, I love you. Thank you for coming on with us. Josh Matthews, the producer, who puts it all together. Sam Ballard down in North Carolina. I'm Eric Brennan. We'll see you all next week. We'll be covering the NASCAR action in Atlanta, all the Formula One car releases that came out, and a whole bunch more. And don't forget, mark it on your calendars. April 29th, we're back at River Rock for Talladega Race Weekend. You've listened to the RPM podcast. We'll see you next time. Good night, everybody.